Um, as I was saying, the egoic nature combined with the predatory force, okay, interwoven with predatory force, is that of a self-centered point of view. It is an isolated point of view. Whereas the true story of a little girl once said, Anna, in the book, I completely recommend a powerful book of a very, very unique and special little girl who had a very profound relationship with the one love. Mr. God, This Is Anna is the book, the name of the book. It's by Finn. And she once said that Mr. God has many viewing points. So God is the one love in the center of the wheel, but also Mr. God has a viewing point from all the spokes of the wheel that go into the center as well. So the soulful viewpoint, from what I understand at this time, and is always growing, that the one love has many viewing points. It is at the center, at the deep within us, but it views from the points of many other places that meet in the center. Okay, so it is the whole. Unconditional love is everything. The philosophies that came out of the Far East had to do with physical life being an illusion. Now, would I go as far as to say that it is an illusion? Well, I am from the Far East, or my heritage is, and I certainly have a deep continuity to my relationship with it, and I suspect that the understanding of illusion might be a little bit too shallow, in the sense that the Tao or Buddhism, the Buddha meant. But would I say that, go as far to say that the physical life is an illusion? Probably not, at least in one sense. But it certainly is. I would say the word I would use is temporary. But again, maybe we're splitting hairs here. But it's temporary. The physical life is meant to change, and it's meant to morph. So it is the viewing points, right? But the issue is that the ego might take those words of the Tao or the Buddha and say, oh, it's just an illusion, and basically, Western modern culture became like all these little spokes of the wheel, like walking around as so-called individuals that talk of the one love and talk about illusion, physical life being illusion, but have no sense of the center, of the backbone. That is what I'm talking about with my work with Ava. That there is a holy backbone that doesn't have much to do with doctrine or rule making. It more has to do with the ever growing understandings of natural law and cosmic love. Okay, that natural law is born from. And one very foundational thing about natural law is that everything is one. And so I guess I would say that if we have a culture, a history, a human history in which the illusion of this idea that we are an island unto ourselves, yes, I would say that is an illusion. And it's a pretty lethal illusion, as we have come to know through our experience as a humankind. But when I was growing up, okay, so I'm talking about, I really feel that I'm supposed to, in my work with Ava, reach deep into the past to understand what is needed now in the present, and so that we can make way for far into the future. And when I was growing up, the ancient drama of the capture of the original feminine and the predatory narrative, so I would say 20 plus years ago, okay, began through the seeds and even saplings and sprouts cultivated and planted of the egoic nature from the 60s and 70s began to really grow. And these ideals of oneness and indigenous identity and freedom, freedom meaning finding a way to live that comes from, originally from the soul, as much as possible, that inherently allows others to live freely as well. These ideals began to get splintered. And what I mean by that, now something is telling me, really pushing me to, Ava is really pushing me to talk about, I'm not going to specify the name of the site or the blog or do something that just become very popular nowadays, just to call out individuals. And I don't say that there's anything innately wrong with calling out destructive individuals, but I think it's being used in a destructive way a lot now. But so I'm not going to call them out. But I had a very deep experience with a woman, a white woman of European descent, who has a very successful blog, and I really liked what she wrote. Talk about the ancient drama of capture of the innocent feminine. There's still a part of me at the time, and still part of me now, but I think less so, having been taken through this cycle many, many times and getting more adept at it, if I say so myself. Well, I really liked what she said on her blog, and I really enjoyed it, and really got into it to a certain extent. But I never had, my history with white women has been trying at best and agonizing and unspeakable at worst. And that's a whole other recording for another time. But I didn't trust her completely in that sense, but I enjoyed what she wrote. And she's one of those white postmodern white women who I really do think has a authentic desire to find her indigenous roots again. So I am not saying that this is completely fake, but she calls herself a hippie, and then I've given you a little bit of a background of what's, from sort of an Asian, non-Western, indigenous point of view would say about hippies. And the reason why I bring her up is because this original desire to tap back into her indigenous roots, okay, which is where the earth people of Europe, which are very ancient, but not as ancient as some places, but the ancient people of Europe. It was definitely, I found out the hard way, that it was definitely used by the predator. And she represents in my life something very profound, in that a cycle of capture and annihilation and colonization that throughout my personal life, and so many women of color and people of color, but I'm speaking to women specifically right now, and of women of color's experience of our relationship to Western women, and in particular Western women who have this desire to come back to Indigenous identity, but they desire to come back to Indigenous identity not through their ancestors. They want to bypass, they want to do a surgical bypass of their entire Christian history, and skip to what they think is the glittery or meaty parts of what they think they want. And the thing is, true Indigenous identity understands, a true Indigenous person understands that there's no such thing as bypassing anything. I don't care what your history has been. Okay, Asian history is certainly not devoid of colonization, for heaven's sakes, whatsoever. But no, the Asian continent certainly slaughters its own people, not just in modern history, not just in the last 200 years, but forever, just like everybody else. But you can't bypass history. History is what it is, and and a lot of it is shameful, a lot of it is gruesome, a lot of it is unspeakable. But the point is that if one is to truly become aligned again with Indigenous identity, there needs to be an understanding that Indigenous people have had since time out of mind, which is that you need to develop a relationship with the death force, the death mother, who is the other side of the life force, the life mother. The goddess is both. The goddess embodies, is the life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth, nature. And so this woman who had this very successful blog, she had a lot of posts about her, pagan rituals, and she had a lot of nuggets of wisdom to say, and she inspires a lot of people. One time, though, she wanted her following to post a picture of themselves in the comments, and I literally scrolled through probably 80, 100, maybe over 100 pictures of people in her comments in this particular post, and they're all white people. That's not a coincidence, okay? That there is a mentality within sort of modern alternative culture that thinks that it has transcended the problems of their ancestors. See, that's the problem. See, that's the problem. Nobody transcends the problems of their ancestors. Nobody gets to bypass it. Everybody has to meet the Death Mother. Everybody has to understand her wisdom in transforming energies that have been closer to the Annihilator's agenda than anything else. It's part of the Indigenous work. I think that she's a profound example because she had maybe even hundreds of thousands of followers. She was quite successful. But she would call. I started to get kind of disillusioned. I began to not have a good feeling about her, and started to suspect that in her success she became captured by the egoic, the predatory agenda that kind of is sneaky. The predator doesn't show up in obvious ways most of the time. He's a charming individual, charming masculine force, and usually, usually the innocent maiden finds out the hard way, what the hell he's actually about. And I suspect that these narratives that were passed down to her, through a lot, no fault of her own, in a lot of sense, from the hippie era, that while people are being slaughtered in Asia, on the Asian continent, by their own people as well as from Western agendas, I don't need to know any of that. I just need to pump this fictional idea of peace and love. Okay, so I don't say this with malice or judgment. Not too much judgment, maybe a little. Okay, I'm Asian. We know the power of shame and judgment, and society needs a little bit. But I've worked through a lot. Trust me, I certainly had to go through a lot with this. My history with white women is, as I said, very deep and sometimes very severe. She was taught that I don't need to know any of this. I just need to pass on this fictional idea that I am beyond my ancestors' mistakes. I am beyond my ancestors' mistakes. I am not them. The thing is, sweetheart, ancestrally, you are. You are a Catholic. You are a Puritan. You are these things. Now, in the postmodern age, there's this, people want to shit on it and say, oh, it's innately evil. And as I said before, it's not innately evil. It's the ancient drama of annihilation happened to have been exacted through the European continent. Okay, this is what happened, guys. It's not acceptable. It's not okay. But what are we gonna do about it? No, you are. I can't tell you how many people. Oh, I'm just an individual. How many white people, in particular white women that I meet. I'm past all that. I'm ascended from my ancestors. I've connected to my pagan ancestors. And oh, really? How can one connect to their pagan ancestors without understanding what their pagan ancestors had to go through, the mistakes they made in the wake and aftermath of torture and annihilation, through the sacred motifs that spring out, no matter what, through the new religion. How can you fully understand your ancestors if you want to bypass all that? So that's the point, And she, what kind of hinted me into the fact that she was had been captured. She had forgotten to keep track of, or maybe she didn't even know to keep track of her intuition and not a fictional version of it. And I'd see the way she would treat people, her followers, and she was very, very self-righteous in the name of, in the name of the fact that she's transcended all this Christian backwards, bigoted bullshit. She loves the word fuck. She loved the word bullshit. Oh, I like it. She'd always say, I think fuck is a beautiful word. Oh, well, okay. Okay. How profound. But so, a part of me was naive in wanting to connect with people who were inspiring. On the other hand, part of me is an old hag in the sense of going through white women's issues for so many decades and having to experience that and release myself from capture over and over and over again. I was weary. I was a little weary. And I started to be clued into the fact that in spite of the fact that she probably started out with really good intentions, she had descended into capture. And the predatory force had lulled her to sleep by saying, here's the easier route. You can bypass all this, and here's the easier route. You can have the easier route and peace, love, depth, ancestral wisdom. You can have all that with bypassing your Christian heritage. And no, if so chances are if you're white, you have a Christian heritage, and that just is what it is. And that includes me, as I said before, very clearly. And the reason why I bring her up is because she would treat people this way online, very self-righteous, and I kind of got clued into her actual mentality, her actual psychology, at least in the present moment, the time that I met her. She even really liked one of my quotes, and so she took it with my permission and posted it, and and so we kind of had a little bit of a relationship there. But the thing is, she thinks she's so unique. And the fact is, she's not unique. Nobody is so unique that they are beyond the ancient patterns of capture, torture, torment, relearning, awakening, learning the dance again, back to sacredness. Nobody is beyond that. Okay? I don't care how successful your fucking blog is. Okay? And she made some comment about how she solved an issue. I'm not going to bring up this particular issue, I don't think, because that's not so much the point. I don't want to sort of use trendy, words that are good originally, but then have been used by the predator in this modern age to become shallow and to become weaponized. So, but she made some comment that she had solved the issues of racism because she had found, because she had found in her white ancestry, in her white pagan ancestry, that they too had some similar thing, similar ritual. And she had bypassed the issue of racism because she had found this as well, and we're all just the same, and stopped talking about racism, basically, because I'm not racist. I have transcended all of that. And I publicly, because I took her at face value, which was naive on my part. On the other hand, it turned out to be one of the best things I ever did for my soul, for my learning to not be naive, my learning to find again the way out of capture. Okay, that I thought that she was cool with being sort of checked or called out, because that's what she did to other people all the time. I saw her do it to other people all the time, and I wasn't being unkind, or I think I even prefaced what I wrote with quite a lot of, I respect what you do in your work and all that. But I checked her and I said, who are you to say that you've solved the issue of racism? Because you've decided to bypass all of this. You think you transcended your history, your ancestral history. That's ridiculous. There has been an issue with European culture annihilating other cultures. As I said, the postmodernism has created weaponized language that's savagely ironically, come out of, the colleges and the universities, which is primarily European original structure. Okay, so it is colonization. It's something I've come to coin as liberal colonization. And anyway, I basically called her out publicly when she tore into me privately in a private message. And it was weird because it was like she used very malicious language and targeted language, but what she was sort of yelling about in writing to me had nothing to do with the actual the actual thing we were talking about, or that we were discussing about, cultural, cultural theft, cultural sort of ignorance, right? Western cultural ignorance. She wasn't addressing that. Her entire writing was about how she was humiliated and how her dad saw it, and it was all this very malicious language that made no sense. But what she did was reveal what the real issues personally for her were. The fact that her dad, what does your dad have to do with any of this? You humiliate people all the time online in the name of, you've transcended everything. You have a level of intuition that is deeper than everybody else. And the fact that I'm a woman of color, an indigenous woman of color, okay, that is strongly but politely like letting you know you're out of line here. The fact that this the predator has been able to use the ideals of Western culture that came out of the Western Empire, okay, that are not, they are new ideas, but they come out of ancient ideals, okay, but use them to erase the work. Okay, as I said, the predator is not creative. The predator can be complicated, but the predator is not creative. Okay, one time when I was learning to play soccer, one of the best first pieces of advice I was given by my first coach was that let people do their fancy footwork. Let them do it. Don't react to it. You stand your ground and you watch them. And they'll dance in front of you. So there's complicated fancy footwork, right? So the predator is complicated, right? But not very creative. Once you understand, okay, we got this show off with the fancy footwork, and he's trying to get you to react here, there, get you and get past you. That you learn, stand your ground. Don't react to all the fanciness, all the gymnastics. Okay, and that is what I'm going to get into with the next section. The same title and everything, but I'm going to get into the predator's fancy footwork. Okay, but it may be complicated, but it's not very creative. It's the same thing over and over again, same rehashed patterns over and over again.